Welcome to the Mindful Living Podcast. I'm your host, Athea Davis. Are you ready to become the person everyone loves, including yourself? Imagine being filled with purpose, joy, and focused energy every single day. I guide kids to gain their inner calm and adults to spark their inner child. Each week, I will give you fun, practical, and relatable, mindfully infused inspiration, insights, and information that you can directly apply in your life, family, and school or business. So, let's get started. Hey there, and welcome back to Mindful Living with me, your host, Athea Davis. You are listening to episode 60, How to Drive Joy in Uncertainty. I am so just honored that you are here tuning in again, whether you are walking for the 10th time for the day in this post-COVID-19 reality. Perhaps the positive side of this unease and uncertainty and just, feeling of loss and grief in so many levels is that there are so many of you out there that are exercising, getting outside more with your family, and practicing that social distancing, right? Or if you're not out there walking, maybe you're running, riding your bike, or perhaps you're that designated grocery shopper during quarantine times. You're on your way to the store, so you're tuning in the car. Wherever, however you are tuning in to Mindful Living with Athea Davis, I am super honored and excited to have you listening today because I had the opportunity to chat with Brad Chandler. And in a moment, I'll give you a tidbit, a little more formal intro about Brad Chandler. Some of you may recognize that name, but we had the opportunity to chat about strategy, business strategy, development, branding, and culture. Now, if you're not in business, don't worry. This is going to apply to anyone in leadership. Anyone in educational leadership, and even my parents, because come on, parents, we need some strategies right now. And I do think a lot of what Brad and I talked about is helpful for any of you listening that I just called out, right? Teachers and my leaders, educational leaders, and my parents out there. So Brad has an extensive background in business strategy and development, including working with the soul-tastic spinning brand Soul Cycle. He's currently, though, a strategist, leader, and integrator at the Hollis Co. If you don't know the Hollis Co, come on, y'all, wake up. That was created by Rachel Hollis. Come on, y'all. She's got 2 New York Times best-selling books. You gotta go read them, gotta go check them out. Girl, Wash Your Face, Girl, Stop Apologizing. And whose husband, Dave Hollis, also has a new book out, Get Out of Your Own Way. He's currently serving as the CEO of the Hollis Co. And again, y'all, if y'all don't know the Hollis Co, check them out. They're doing some amazing things. They create business and women's conferences, and they have the Start Today Journal brand and a whole host of other amazing things going on. But, Brad Chandler has a key role over there at the Hollis Co. He is currently serving as the VP of Business Strategy and Development. And so I wanted to invite him on to the show to talk to him, as I said, about strategy, development, branding, and culture. And if you're thinking, well, I'm not really in a role like that, hold on, because I really make this relatable to my parents, to my educators, to my leaders out there in any capacity. This episode is for you, and particularly now that we're in post-COVID-19 world, this is really for you because we focus on looking at how we can pivot, not just our business, but our schools, but how we parent using technology, how we diversify in our connections, learning, in times of unease and uncertainty, just doing hard things. We talk about how story is key, whether that's in your school, your family, or your business. You're going to find a lot of value in this episode. So I'm super excited because Brad, his main goal as an integrator and leader and strategist over at the Hollis Co is that he develops sticky tactics that drive revenue. And when it comes to top-down work, Brad's core proficiency is identifying systemic problems and finding ways to solve them. Oh boy, Brad, do we need your insights now more than ever? I think they'll be really helpful. And anyone out there in education, whether you're a leader or you're teaching in the classroom, now is your opportunity, as you've been virtually teaching and learning, to really hone your skills in digital media. I really, really think this is going to be key for the future. And if you don't have your personal branding platform, come on, y'all. It's out there. It's time that you get it out there, get your name out there. Teachers are the most, creative, innovative, adaptable humans I know. And you have a lot to offer, a lot of unique, what I like to call sparkle to offer the world. And it's time you let, not just your students, of course your students, but connecting with other professionals and like-minded educators, time to reach your sparkle out in the world. So there's just a lot to soak up in this episode 60, How to Drive Joy in Uncertainty. And grab your favorite cup of Cafe Mojo, enjoy your walk, your drive, your run, your bike ride, and enjoy my chat with Brad Chandler. And I will see you on the flip side. Enjoy. Well, I want to welcome you, Brad, to the show, Mindful Living with Athea Davis. Thank you for being on today.
Thanks so much for having me.
I am so excited to have you on because when I learned, and I must have read this maybe in an Instagram post or maybe it was somewhere on LinkedIn, I can't remember, but maybe it was someone within the Hollis company that referred to you as Mr. Sunshine. Do you have like that nickname or something?
I don't. You probably read it somewhere, but that feels somewhat appropriate in business culture. Yes, I'll take it.
Okay, all right. And I was like, oh, I love this. And then I also saw that you are into Vipassana meditation and loving all the things that you guys are doing there. I was like, I've got to have Brad on the show. So,
Yeah.
as someone who identifies as the chief sparkling officer at my school doing mindfulness education work, sparkles meet sunshine. It's going to be a great mix today. So,
Excited to
and
hear.
I think we need a dose of that because we're in post COVID-19 world reality here where things feel, uncomfortable, uncertain, and just, unease everywhere. And so I also want to be really real in our conversation today and also create and choose to cultivate that sunshine, that sparkle, that joy, and what we talk about.
Love it.
So I want you to give just a thumbnail sketch into your big why in terms of your focus and strategy and development. And I have a lot of educators and leaders listening here, and I know that they would really benefit hearing your story. Like, why should we even care about strategy and development? I mean, particularly right now in post COVID-19 world, there's a lot of thinking and planning and replanning and like recalibrating on what our strategies are in our given context. So I think it would be helpful if and really nice to hear about your big why behind strategy and development.
Yeah, I think right now, looking at what is happening, it really paints the picture of how I view strategy and the why behind strategy. I've always been a huge proponent to scaling. I think it's wonderful to have a huge dream and to build towards a huge dream. The question is how you do it. And I think that you can't, it's imagine like building a house. You can't just have the vision of the house and then start throwing up everything to the house. You have to make sure you're building the foundation correctly and then make sure that, the structure is correct. Because you do hit a moment like this where everything might change. And so you will need to pivot. And so the structure you have set up have you actually planned for a pivot in some way? So I always think through the lens of scaling, because I think it's the smartest way to do it, because you don't know what tomorrow holds and you might need to pivot. So if you've scaled in an appropriate way, then you are able to pivot. Um, strategy means to me that you are building a business in a way that wherever you're standing at any moment, you're looking for the next right thing because it's a
Mm-hmm.
step, as opposed to, oh, this is where I'm going and I have my blinders on and I'm building that direction no matter what. There are people that do that, and to me that's a risky game, because unless you do that very quickly and it just launches, life is going to happen before you're able to reach that dream. And so you need to make sure that you're building appropriately and taking the next right step in your strategy to build a solid foundation.
Yeah, can you tell us and dive more deeply into scaling? Like when we hear that word, do you necessarily mean just getting bigger, diversifying? Can you elaborate a little more?
Of course. Well, and that scaling, I think it's going to vary. For some people, it might mean diversification. For some people, it might just be getting bigger. The also just growing for the sake of growing isn't necessarily scaling wisely, because if
Mm,
you're just trying to inflate, then are you looking at, do you have the structure in order to do so? What if, the idea of like, we're going to just strike it big, that actually could destroy your business, because suddenly, are you able to handle that influx of business? Are you, the best case of luck might actually be your biggest nightmare. And so it's really a case of looking at strategy in terms of what is the best for this business? How are we looking to grow? And what does that mean? Does it mean we grow in size? Does it mean that we're growing in infrastructure? Does it mean that we're
mhm.
diversifying what we're producing? That any kind of setting a new goal or throwing a new flag into the distance means you have to set up the structure to get there, not just go for it, in my eyes. Because if you just go for it, God forbid it actually happens, you might not be ready for that success.
Yeah, and I think you said something really important as you were talking about scaling and diversifying, which made me also think of what you mentioned earlier was pivoting. And so many of us post COVID-19 are pivoting.
Hmm.
We are, social distancing many places, including, I think, where you guys are in Austin and here in Houston, we are on lockdown still currently. And I think of a term that an educator, many years, an educational leader taught me years ago with happy flexibility. Things will look a certain way for a while, and then you have to pivot and you go with it. What can you do with the challenge? How can you pivot? Can you talk more about, what people should be doing about pivoting right now in terms of whether they're growing their infrastructure virtually or needing to maybe not scale up with people because of the impact of COVID-19 on the economy, but maybe they're scaling more in terms of that digital infrastructure?
Sure. I think for me, scaling wisely, um, and this is just it's a well-rounded conversation in general in life. Like, we can't have every conversation that's just around the positive best case scenario. I
Hmm.
think it's about being sober, in our vision, which is where meditation also comes into play very much for me, just seeing things as they are. So it's always helpful to have people on your team that say, okay, we're scaling this way and we're putting all of our resources here. Is that wise? What happens if that resource is cut off? What will we
Mm,
do? And so scaling has to look at all the possible scenarios and making sure that you don't have all of your eggs in one basket, because if your supply chain changes, like, what happens if? And it doesn't mean that it's a doomsday. It means that's a proper scaling. That, like, you can't build a house in California without thinking, what happens if there's an earthquake? It doesn't mean there's
right.
going to be an earthquake and, my gosh, we're like, be careful, you can't live here. You just have to think ahead. That's proper scaling. As you grow, are you saying, are we only focusing on this as our only revenue stream and aren't accounting for if something were to happen or this were to change? The one thing we face very much at the Hollis Co is kind of the bus test. What happens if um, we can't rely on these personalities? What
Yeah.
happens if, and so it's not doomsday, it's reality. Scale in a way that you are anticipating certain outcomes, and it's all balanced. You want a balanced company, you want a balanced strategy, even if it's for yourself, for your family, for any kind of outcome. Make sure that you're just thinking of a balanced approach to it, is what I would say for strategy.
I think that's really great that what if, thinking about, well, if this, in terms of a business, it would, like you were saying, well, if that stream of revenue it declines, what else do we have? And I want to bring this back particularly for educators and educational leaders listening, and parents as well, because if we're used to sending our kids off to school in a physical location, what if, as we're facing right now in post COVID-19 world, that's not happening? And so schools across the nation, the world really, have had to, in many cases, within several days, convert their physical schools to virtual schools to shift with, what is required of the moment. And so, I had, I wonder sometimes, had these things been thought before? I know some schools, many private schools, perhaps this is more popular, I think, in those areas than in public institutions, just maybe because of funds, etc., had, some of these things in place, virtual platforms, but many big public institutions, public education institutions did not, and have had to create them very quickly, seemingly overnight.
Yeah, and here's the beautiful thing I think about staying in a positive strategic mindset is that when you are always in a mindset of creating strategy of like what is the next right thing and creating a balanced approach, in every moment and in every pivot you do, there are a new set of possibilities. There are a new set of stepping stones. And so it's going to be
Mm.
very interesting to see now what happens as we're going through this moment when companies start to see, oh, well, so there's something entirely different is possible that we hadn't even imagined before. And now
Hmm.
a new set of strategy might develop. And I think even as people are pulling things into their homes more, like teachers are now going into the home, a new set of possibilities um, emerge. And so that is like a new strategy because now we'll have revenue streams that we had never even imagined before. And to me, that's also strategy. Being clear enough to see the new moment, not just for what's been cut off, but is there another possibility that has just opened itself up for us to put into the map?
Yes, thank you. I love that perspective on seeing again, like, what other pivots will we have? What other experiences of happy flexibility will we have once we are in this new reality for a while and see, oh, wow, look, teachers, for instance, are virtually teaching many different, classes and subjects like they weren't before. And so what possibilities lie in that? I think that's still an open question to
Mhm.
many leaders and educators and parents, listening here. I know the parents have a vote. As a parent, I'm like, I love my kids, but I definitely think we've got to have some face-to-face time at school once this all blows over, for sure. But maybe there's some ratio of, virtual teaching and learning and face-to-face physical teaching and learning. I mean, we are social beings and we love that contact, but like you said, there, it does open the door to see, well, what's possible here? Can we save money in education and spend it elsewhere? I mean, that's certainly something that I think about in terms of costs and not having enough funds for certain, programs. Well, what if we did more of a virtual model in some things and then open it up to more, having funds for other important, like social emotional learning needs, for instance.
100%. And this because there's a new dynamic now that's been changed. My mother is an educator, was an educator. She's now retired. I have a lot of educators in my family, and I think there's always been that conversation of what happens at school versus what happens at home, and
Mhm.
parents being involved and more actively involved. And now the dynamics have completely shifted,
Yeah.
and so there's probably a larger conversation to be had in terms of are the parents, now parents are with their kids all day because there's nowhere else to be, and yet how does this balance then go, is what is expected from the schools, but then also what can be done at home, and maybe as a
Mm,
parent is looking at, well, what is my strategy, how does my strategy change for the development of my kids
mm.
here, and the time that I spend with them, and the quality, so the onus starts to shift as well, in terms of uh, what are my own expectations of the way I meet my children's needs, since I now am the sole provider of that sort of
Yeah.
information.
Other than
So
ripping our hair out, right? No. And
right,
shout
and
out to
maybe
all your educator family members.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, and this is a definitely a tough season for the educators that are still teaching, and my family too. It's because the parents still have their
Hmm.
strong desires to meet the needs of their children. Um, I think this brings an interesting conversation. I think overall in meeting the needs of our kids.
Yeah, and I think we're all in that process, of just figuring it out. I mean, I know here within Houston, Austin, San Antonio, Dallas areas, this post COVID-19 world has only been a few weeks for us. I mean, though globally it has been going on, since late December, early January, but for us on that local level, it has only been a few weeks. It feels like a lifetime, it seems like, in some respects, and oddly enough, in others, it seems like it's speeding up and overwhelming in some sense. But yeah, I think really redefining what those expectations are at home, and building those relationships with your own kids, etc., and what's expected of them, like, within this context at home, and
Yeah.
what's really important in this world that we call education. And one of the things you mentioned, meditation, earlier. As a mindfulness educator at KIPP Texas, I'm super passionate about teaching and spreading mindfulness education, because I fundamentally and truly believe that our emotions and thoughts, they drive everything that we do. And so if we gain a handle on those things from the inside out, we can really live, a joyful, fulfilling life. And now more than ever, in this uncertain reality, these tools and skills are being called upon, in ways that just have not, in the education world. And so thinking about, what you were talking about earlier about pivoting, I definitely see this as could quite possibly be, if it's pivoted in the right way, uh, and right, not meaning right or wrong, but right in that sort of, looking out for the common good of humanity right way, that this could be a really huge positive and a pivot that we see in education.
Oh, 100%. I think there are a lot of businesses out there right now that are seeing the opportunity of creating full curriculum or ways to reach kids that are exciting, that parents will gladly like press play to make sure that they get education. It's wide open now because I think parents are understanding that that the right resources are not there because clearly like even schools are scrambling to provide it, and so there are a lot of businesses that hopefully will step up and take that lead, even in terms of like being active. I think we'll probably see a lot more ways that kids can like quote unquote move their bodies
Hmm.
online, and education. But this is one of those moments that I think we're going to see it will spur an increase in a different way of thinking about education, probably on screens, but
Yes.
which is a whole
Which
different conversation.
it is, right? Because I think for me, you said it, so I have to mention it here, is that, technology is amazing. And I think one of the things, that I've discovered this past couple of weeks, especially converting my classroom to a virtual classroom, it's exhausting in a different way. And we have to really be cognizant of the amount of time that our kids are spending, that we're all spending on technology. I know that conversation, has been going on for a while, and here it's like our lifeline right now because we
Mhm.
are social distancing, and yet this is in many respects keeping us alive and feeling that sense of connectedness that we wouldn't be feeling if we didn't
Mhm.
have it, interestingly enough. So it will be interesting to see how all of this looks in a couple of months, in terms of setting boundaries around technology at the same time that we're receiving so much life from technology during this time of transformation that we're experiencing.
Agreed. But what a beautiful opportunity for teachers at this moment, I think, that can see that, oh, there might be a different way to do what we've been doing,
Mm.
especially if they feel that there have been flaws in the educational system in the first place.
Hmm.
This is an interesting time to start resetting in their own way.
Oh, yes, no doubt. And a funny note here, anecdote is I posted a video in my virtual classroom asking my students and welcoming them back from spring break. And one of the questions and I had an opening video and then a question. We're using Google Classrooms. And the question was, well, what do you think will be similar and different about your mindfulness and yoga class virtually versus face to face, physically in school? And several students said, well, I think we're going to learn all those great mindfulness and yoga tools, but you will not be interrupted and I can hear everything that you're saying.
Right.
And I'm like, yes, that is one super positive, sparkly, sunshiny point. I love it. So
Right.
finding the light through that storm, definitely. Well,
Great.
Brad, one thing you mentioned earlier, I had to go back to. You said you called something called the bus test. What is the bus test?
Buzz test would be, let's say, your main product, main idea. If that, like, maybe it's a person. So say that it's you. Say that, like, you're building your own personal brand as a teacher and you're it. And you
Hmm.
start employing people under your personal brand. And if you were hit by a bus, what would happen to
Mm,
your company that you've built? And I think that's um,
mm,
there's something called the E-Myth Revisited, which I highly recommend for anyone who's a small business owner,
yeah,
which I don't know if you've read, but it's just fantastic. But
I have. It's a good book. Yeah.
his main premise is just that, like, if you love baking apple pies and you're so good at it and people love it, and you open your shop and you're baking these apple pies and you're doing it, and like, you eventually will become so tired because you're overworked, and at that point you'll realize that you own your job, you don't own a business,
Right.
because your business is not standing without you, in which case that doesn't pass the bus test, because if you're taken out, you don't actually have a business, you just own your job.
Yep.
So the bus test would be, how do you build a business that's actually a system, which goes into what I love about strategy as well, a business being a collection of processes. So what do the collection of processes look like that they could be sustained if, like, these main kind of products or pillars or the thing that's mainly running it is taken out?
No, I love that, and I I remember that story that was shared in that book about the apple pie very clearly. And for my educators listening out there, right? Like maybe you don't have a business, but you're running a school, and you have collections of processes and these structures in place. So if you're not there leading it, the thing that you're creating, not just educating, but the culture, which leads me into my next question here in a moment, that's what you want that's the legacy that you're leaving on your campus when you're not there, or when you're bringing, and hopefully you're not having educators come in and out, but you're building that culture where they say, oh yes, I know that, whatever it is, whatever that school is, and I love it because I feel amazing when I'm there. And that brings me to my question, Brad. I love all the culture building that you guys have going on at the Hollis Company. It's so much joy and sunshine. And I want to know, what does culture mean to you? I know it's like a big, it's one word here, but a big umbrella. And a lot of people throw that term around like, oh, well, culture, we're going to have like whatever day at school, or, in the office, we'll have, Taco Thursdays, or we're going to do this. And perhaps that is some aspect of culture. But for you, what does it mean?
The way I think of culture actually goes back to like a high school experiment. So when you used to culture something, it was like in a petri dish, right? That little like pink dish,
Yes.
you would put something in it and it would grow. And with that pink stuff is what it's meant to do was create a very sustainable atmosphere for something to grow well. And so, just like that, I think that's a business. And so, it
Mm,
is our responsibility as people in it. And as we start adding more, we want something to flourish within that little petri dish, which means we're putting in the right ingredients, but we're also making sure that we're keeping out certain ingredients because we need it to flourish. And so for me personally, I passionately attached to the idea that a business, especially a small business, is meant to be transformative, and not just transformative for the world outside. God, God willing, that's a beautiful idea, and hopefully that's
mhm,
true. But most powerfully for the people that work there, because you're going to attract a certain type of person that obviously wants to create the things that you're creating, and what they come to work for as people is actually to grow and go through a process as well. So when you
mm,
look for like setting up kind of the core principles of the our very powerful statements to say what we believe in and how we do it, you're setting up things that people are going to become intrinsically involved in. And so they must be aspirational in a way that we're also personally setting up sort of goalposts of this is how I can show up to myself every day. This is how I can show up to other people every day. This is the type of person that I want to be. And those sorts of internal actions as it relates to everyone else is the beautiful culture in this little petri dish that creates a magic. And so, to that effect of what you're creating, you also want to make sure that when you bring someone in that obviously is not a match to that, or could possibly be, of
mhm.
course, granted, let me say that every person you're going to bring in is going to change your culture. Your culture
Right.
will, it will grow. It is inevitable. It's meant to be that way because you might end up with something more beautiful, but it's also being aware of people that are going to bring something in that might be a poison to your culture. And it's very important that you quarantine that, as we know, it's important to do, separate, and then it's important remove because culture can also go bad. And so it's something you have to actively grow. And usually it's setting up, I believe, it's setting up core beliefs that people can very much attach to on an emotional gut level because it will change their lives internally by doing so.
So I love it. I love the petri dish analogy there. I love, making sure you're creating an environment where it's something within, the people within that environment are growing. And really, I think you honed it there, setting up, core beliefs and your values, and always going back to those values. Any, you know, um, leader out there and educator out there know how important the values that drive what you do. And for me personally, I know if I'm not on my game that day, that I have to go back to, okay, what's the value system, what value am I really trying to work towards in this moment today, even if it's painful that I wasn't doing it 100%. That value is such a guiding force. And in fact, I think, building culture to be diverse and collaborative and growth mindset oriented, and what I love to call full of sparkly sunshine, goes back to what you were saying earlier, is that it's very much an inside out process too. There's that internal transformation, that growth, that whoever you attracted based on your own values, setting up your business, your school, even your home environment as a leader, leading your partnership, your kids, that you are going on a growth journey, or you're not going anywhere and it's not going to be looking very good.
100%. Um, and that's why it's important to, I think one of the pitfalls that companies fall into is that they're very like aspirational sort of claims, or very general, we love growth, or we, and it has to be super relatable, and it
Yeah.
has to be something that is just in plain words that make absolute sense, in as few words as possible, because it does actually inform even the way that someone will respond to an email.
Mm.
It'll respond, it'll change the way that they just talk to their coworkers. It's small, the way that they will clean up after themselves in the break room. Like, it will inform everything on such a small level, which means that these sorts of core beliefs have to be very, very, very relatable and very approachable in a way that
Can you
they
give
can
me
be
an
profitable.
example of that, Brad? Because I totally get what you're saying, because I get that.
Yeah,
But for someone out there listening, when they're like, okay, what does that mean? Then I have a core belief that's relatable and like and understandable and practical. Can you give me something like just
sure.
really concrete?
Yeah. So the most easy, so coming from Soul Cycle before, there were some very strong core values. Like, for instance, one of them was we get dirty, right? So it was
Mm,
very clear from the beginning, as soon as you signed on, like even in an interview process, you can go over like, these are our core beliefs. We get dirty. It means that we're all on the same team. There is no one on the team that does something that the more dirty task, or like, we all might clean bathrooms. We get dirty because that is something we all do. So it's very clear from even on an interview point. Um, to explain it a little more, at the Hollis Co, our own core values have gone through evolutions, and I'm sure we'll continue to. We had one that was positivity.
mm,
So it was just about, positivity and what that means. And then it evolved into something more relatable, which at this point is very, very relatable because we see it everywhere. But the goal is to say, we choose joy,
mm,
because positivity didn't say enough. Like, what does that mean? What does it mean to be positive? What does it mean to like always see that didn't help, but to say,
right.
no, no, we choose joy at every moment. We're always finding way to activate the joy, to find the joy. Then that is, now we say it and we put it on t-shirts. We say it everywhere because it actually means something. At any moment, we have a choice. We have a choice of how we're showing up, and we can either show up with a bad attitude, or we can show up by choosing joy. Um, so it becomes very active when it becomes relatable.
You really just took the words out of my mouth, because I had my next thought was, well, how do you activate these values? And one of the ways that you just described is that you are out there saying it as a company all the time. And so, other than just saying it, what other suggestions do you have to those listening? And again, because I want to make this really relatable to my parents at home, when you're leading your kids, or and if you don't have kids and you're in a partnership, this applies too, because you have values in your partnership. Or whether you're leading, your staff at school or in a business, or your kids in the classroom, you have some value that's really embedded in that energetic exchange. How are you doing it? What's another way besides saying it that we can make sure that we're activating that value and that we're really living it? Is it
Well,
like at a staff meeting or
yeah,
any?
in terms of culture, like, one thing we do at Hollis Co is that we have our LaCroix Awards. So each of our core values, we have actually designed these little LaCroix, one
I
for each value. I don't know if you've seen it already,
I
but
have it. So cute.
yeah. So the goal is, what happens is it rotates through every week. So whoever has won an award, they're going to be presenting their own the next week. And so they're choosing one of the core values to someone who they feel embodies that new award.
Mm,
So we are servant leaders. Maybe they see someone who really goes above and beyond for other people. They're then going to present that at the all hands meeting to this other person to say what about them they admire, how they see that played out, how much we appreciate it. And so it's like, every time it happens, we have tears and cry. Like, it's just a beautiful moment to be celebrated for something that feels so authentic. Um, but it also just reminds us about what's important and why it's important, um, in an approachable way, because
mm.
it's not just about saying something, it's about celebrating it when you see it in action. I think is the most important piece.
No,
And
that's
that's what's hard with something like positivity. How do you
mhm.
celebrate that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you certainly can. If you see someone that's always choosing joy, you certainly know how to pat them on the back and be like, your attitude rocks. I love that you're bringing this all the time. I am a huge believer in celebration. I have three kind of core values myself, which are clarity, consistency, and celebration. So
Mm,
celebration is a huge piece. It's very, very important once you have identified your kind of core values, that you're also celebrating people who embody that, even in very, very small ways. This is not like, oh, someone's really gone above and beyond. It can be little things. Oh, hey, how you handled that moment, I think was really awesome. I just want to celebrate that about you because, um, for whatever reason, celebration, especially as we're dealing with younger people, in like millennials, and like there is a lot of celebration, and it's not doesn't have to be. I think it feels for us older folk, because I'm in my mid 40s, at first it was like, oh, what do you mean you have to celebrate people so much? But that's just my own resistance of approaching something with a lot of positivity and celebration for other people. So it's not their fault, it's mine. It's my like, why would it be so hard to show up and give 10 freaking you're awesomes today, five
yeah.
high fives today? Why, like, that should not be difficult. And once I got over that, the more that you celebrate people and the more you high five people for little things, the culture really starts to ramp as well, because
I
people
love it. I
feel.
love that you said how like it's so simple. And I love the LaCroix Award idea and how you thread your values through those weekly awards and then it rotates. And for my educators out there, and again, really this is like for anybody, but here you go. You have students in your classrooms or those that you're leading on your campus. And some of you are already out there doing this, and some of you are doing this in a different way, maybe not values based, maybe it's more like behavior based, but I want you to start thinking about it in terms of value based and character based, because I really think that's going to make a lasting impact to those that you're leading, whether it's in the classroom, in your business, or those that you're leading in an educational institution, that you are practicing making sure in these small ways, like you're saying, like giving the high fives, giving the fist bumps, looking at what your values are in the classroom and highlighting those in the way that is helping them live sustainably in your own, organization. So thank you so much for sharing that. It made me think, I heard this conversation from the former Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, and he was talking about culture and building relationships in the sense that when he had his meetings, his staff meetings, that they would spend a couple of minutes each meeting just asking a few people, and they would rotate as well, just bringing out their phones and sharing some pictures just from, like there were no requirements, like just share a few pictures on your phone that are really meaningful to you, to really get to know others in a more personal level. So it wasn't just all culture in the sense of what are we trying to build here in this school, in this business, but bringing that personal flair to what makes you tick as a person. So I liked that one as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, if you think about it, like all of us on a very human level, whether it's inside your company or it's someone on the outside that you're serving, we all would just want to be seen. We all just want to
Yes.
be seen as people. It's the most human thing that's possible. Is just we want to be seen and know that we're valued. Like, and I think unless
Yes.
your culture is really finding a way to value someone for what they are bringing to the table and who they are, no matter who they are, then you cannot have a culture. Like your petri dish is off because the substrate is not correct.
Mm.
It has to be based on value and seeing people and celebrating them as they are, no matter what.
Beautiful. No, I love it. And I completely agree about that. Fundamentally, how we're wired.
Yeah.
Brad, many educators and leaders out there really want to grow their impact. What do they need to be focusing on, or what do they need to be doing right now, particularly in our new reality, given that we are virtually hanging out more? What are some things that they can be doing right now to grow that impact in this virtual world that we're living, more? I mean, we were living in that world before, the coronavirus, but now this is ultimately how we're connecting a great percentage of our time, in many cases 100% of our time, depending on where we are in the world. So what can we be doing right now to really grow the impact?
And when you say impact, do you
Yeah.
internally or
Yeah.
externally or
Just
like?
meaning like, their impact in the sense of connecting to other like-minded individuals that
Okay.
love what they do, connecting to other educators, other leaders. Perhaps they have, educators are super innovative, creative individuals, and many of them are already online. Some of them aren't. So maybe they're a little hesitant to really try to get their brand out in the world, and to let their light shine, so to say. What can they be doing right now to start growing in that way out in the social media and online?
So I think the way I want to answer this question also bridges back to a little bit of the what to be wary of when you're setting up your core culture, but then also how to increase impact. As you set up your principles and they're very much value based, what you have to be wary of is that everyone that comes across these sort of core principles, um, they are going to watch to see if you live by them.
Mm,
So that means you have to be very conscious of whoever's like, if you're a leader of any kind, when you make decisions, in my opinion, no one's ever watching for what you decide. They're
right.
they're looking for why you decided. So even if it's something that doesn't seem to make sense, if a pivot might go against a core value, as long as you come through with that description, but you will lose people if you don't actually live by those values that you set up. So
Mm,
in creating impact, then to bridge into that, which I feel how you like when we talk about like, even personal branding, it's kind of the same way.
mm-hmm.
We brand through consistency. So if you show up with one set of a value offering, one personal statement, or it through consistency, people come to count on that from you.
Mm-hmm.
When you start to show up differently, people don't understand why, and your impact will drop because
Yeah.
you get confused. And so I think the way you build a personal brand, you build personal impact is through consistency. That's why I believe it's one of my core principles as a leader. People just want to know what they're going to get from you. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
being if they can't follow you or assume they know what you're going to show up like, then that's they don't want to count on you as a leader. And I think that's something that people shoot themselves in the foot a lot with. So in terms of impact with the team, what are the things that you're going to stand on? What are the flags and the stakes you're throwing into the ground to say, this is who I am, and this is the way I operate, and this is the way I will choose to, and then do that with consistency. So even if
Mm,
you're building a personal brand on the outside, what sort of value content, what is your offering that you're passionate about, that you're willing to share, and just do so, continue to do so, do it in a
right.
way that people can count on you for. But then if you say, I do this, and then I do that, oh, and then this and this and that, not so much today, I'm not gonna then that's not something that anyone can count on, and they're gonna stop wanting it from you. But you
Yeah.
build influence by providing and providing and providing consistently in a way that people want to trust you.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I was thinking about how important our values are as you were saying that, and the consistency. And are you practicing what you're preaching about, what you're teaching about, and in a very authentic way? And for me, and I think, anybody out there, whether they're teaching or leading, serving in any way, it really goes back to the values, your personal values, your values as a school, team, family. Are you practicing them every day, even when you don't feel like it, even when it's hard? And right now, stuff is hard.
Mhm.
It's really hard. It's easy to go into the negative spiral of how the mind likes to wander and go through that negative feedback loop of, oh no, this is canceled, what's next, and this is hard and everything's over kind of thing. And then you say, wait a minute, what are my values, and can I
Mhm.
practice that here right now today?
Exactly. Yeah, and the clearer you are, then the more you can make those actionable, because it's the action part that's important. I think kids are so attuned to this, and then we forget that as they're older in a way that, like, I just remember being young, and when parents or adults would say like, "Well, just respect me," but it's like, well, but you also, if I don't feel respected, then that's not, you know what I mean? Like, you're not
Yeah.
living respect. It's not, you're not saying respect in a way that you understand it. So then I don't understand what you mean. And so kids get it, and I think we lose it as we get older. Then if we're not actually acting out of our values, then we also can't see it reflected back to us. It starts with us. You teach
Mm.
people how to treat you, and if I show up with you in full respect constantly and celebration, then it's very unlikely that you're going to come back to me with something different.
So powerful. And I really want to bring that back to my my educators in the classroom, particularly those working with students that perhaps there's a lot of friction there. There may be a lot, circumstances that are just really hard for you and that student. And the power in not giving up, and the power in you showing up in the way that you yourself want to be celebrated,
Mm.
even if they choose not to celebrate you the way that you feel like you should be. It doesn't matter. Like, the more you keep showing up, it will make a difference. And I've seen this time and time again. And it may not be a week or a month. Sometimes things just are, hard seasons can last for a long time, particularly for our students out there coming from low social economic status households, and a whole list of other traumas in their background. Is that, a lot of times they do turn around because you keep showing up no matter what. And it doesn't matter if they do, but you do. And I will tell you time and time again, where I've had students just completely like transform after so long, like, we're just like best friends. It's like, hey, where you been all this year? And so, what a beautiful thing that is.
Yes, because it needs to be patterned. There's a beautiful two little passages that I love in a tome that I've studied for a while, which is the only thing missing from any given situation is what you're not offering. In a sense that it's
Ah, so
possible for you to give
good.
something that you don't feel you have. It's possible to provide that because that's what's missing. So you can't look for like, well, these kids don't respect me. Well, but how much are you bringing to the table in terms of respect? How much are you bringing to the table in terms of celebration? Because once you're offering it, then it's there. But if there's no one setting the roadmap for it, then how can anyone follow it? And that's the hard part as a leader, I think, is to stand on the front of that bow and say, this is where we're going and I can see it and I can pattern it for you. Even if you're not up to speed with me, you will eventually, because I can keep forging ahead because I have it
Mm.
in me. So let me show you that it's possible. That's one of the beautiful things about Rachel too. Rachel Hollis is, I think she very much as a team and very much as friends. Like, she is committed to showing what's possible for other people,
Mhm.
whether or not we're able to rise and step along. It's everyone else's choice, but she consistently wants to be able to bring as many people to say, here is what's possible. I hope you can see this is possible for you as well. Um,
Mm.
and I think that's the beautiful part of people when we can show up to each other that way to say, oh, here, let me show you just what is possible in this moment, whether or not you can see it.
That is so powerful. Definitely gave me chills. So, so good. One of the things that you do at the Hollis Company is that you help with sticky ideas, and teachers and those leading teachers, heck, my parents, we gotta have these sticky ideas, especially when they turn to be teenagers, because that's a whole different other animal there. And as a mom to a 14-year-old, I am definitely learning all learning my way through. But, what advice or guidance do you have to help educators and educational leaders make their ideas and initiatives and policies sticky to those they lead and teach and serve? Does it go back to the values that we carry? Is there something else?
In a sense, and I think it's the way that the values are explained. For me, I'm a huge advocate across the board, both internally, but also as it comes to marketing. Um, story. Story is first and foremost. If the idea of story is foreign, I would say start with Joseph Campbell. He's sort of the godfather of this
Yeah.
conversation. But we all have a strong connection to, and this is why like something like Star Wars was such a huge hit, is because it spoke to something in us. There is a story that we're all connected to, and we know the patterns of stories so well. And so the more that I mean, the fastest way to get buy-in with people is through story, whether it's your own, whether it's someone else's. And it may not look through a, like, let me tell you a story. Stories are told in
Mm-hmm.
many, many, many different ways. But the more people can buy in, even, and this is where I think the beauty of personal transformation happens in something like the Hollis company, when people can start buying into their own story increasingly, then that's a very, very, very powerful bond. And it's like a snowball effect. But so how do you tell a story that actually someone is going to feel involved personally?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all kids want at the end of the day. They want to just buy into something. I remember that's why I think, me personally, the most powerful classes for most people in their
Mm-hmm.
teen years were like their freshman and junior literary school teacher, their English class, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden we started reading Beloved, and we started reading these powerful pieces of works by these amazing writers, and these stories that we could just fall into that showed us something different. And I think that's the beauty. If you think you're the most powerful teacher that you've had, is because they told you stories in a way that you felt seen. And across the board, all the way from marketing to culture, we're just, this is all start part of the same conversation we've been having, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what is the story that I see myself in, that I feel validated in, that I am part of, that's not foreign from me?
No, I love it. And I want to remind those listening too that I know perhaps some of you may be listening and you're thinking, oh, yeah, I get it, story. And some of you may be listening and think, oh, gosh, I have no story. Story. What do I do? How do I talk about this and make it sticky and relatable to those, whether you're, 10 or 14 or 15 in a classroom, or I'm leading, someone, in my school or my business or my home. Really, what I've found is just your everyday stories can be very powerful too, and making it like relatable, that in the sense that, hey, just as much as I may be leading or teaching, I am still I'm like connected to you on a different level here. It doesn't mean that I'm higher up or whatever. Like, we have that connection in the sense that you are also always teaching me something, even though I may be leading you or teaching you or parenting you. You're also teaching me something, and there's just such power in those kind of storytelling techniques, I think, as well. And for me personally, like in the classroom, just my, personal stories, kids just love them so much, because I gotta say, some kids love mindfulness education. They love that experience. And some kids are like, what in the world is this? I don't think so. Right. And so just always figuring out and adapting different ways. I actually like to call it access point, like finding different access points through different stories, whether it be a hip hop song or whether it just be, a story of what happened between me and my teen at home, to connect with different personalities that I'm meeting and greeting and leading every day.
Yeah, and I think it goes the same thing with being a business leader, any type of leader. I am just not of the frame of mind that you hide the problems, you hide your vulnerabilities. Leadership
Yeah.
is wrong. Like, I just don't buy it. I think that's actually poor leadership, because
Mm-hmm.
then people are not connected to you, and you better hope they're connected to the mission. Otherwise, they're gone. Good leadership means showing up today and be like, oh, this is a moment that's hard for me. Oh, this is a moment, because those, as you said, access points. That's a beautiful way. Is like, the more you can show up to kids or employees or anyone to say, no, this is a hard moment for me, and this is why. That vulnerability is relatable. And when people can relate to your story that you're telling at that moment, then they also feel seen, because it says, oh, I'm not alone in what I'm feeling, or I've felt that way before, or I
Yes.
understand why she's maybe in a bad mood today, or I understand. And so I always think showing up with vulnerability first and foremost, and being clear on how you're feeling, is appropriate as a leader, if not imperative.
Definitely. And full Brene Brown style, I mean, it totally obliterates that shame factor and creating a space to be seen and to, have those feelings and share and know like, hey, you're not alone. No, I love it. And I'm so happy you said it, because oftentimes when I'm out and about talking to educators, and I've heard this before, like, zip it at the door, don't bring that stuff inside. It's like, hello, like, we're human beings here. I mean, clearly not, I'm not going to dump all my baggage everywhere, but at the same time, I mean, for me, I, I get so, I'm just really authentic with so many of my students in a way that's appropriate in terms of what I'm sharing. Is like, hey, your struggles might look this way, but my struggle looks this way. And look at that. Like, it's similar. Like, we have this struggle, and how does that impact us, in the way that we show up? And I want you to know, like, we have this space where we can just love each other and be compassionate and empathetic, and to help each other get through. So I appreciate you saying that about, showing up in a vulnerable way really helps us be seen, and having that ultimate connection. So thank you for
Yeah.
that.
And modeling what it looks like to shake it off.
Right?
You
Yeah.
can be
Like,
a great
shake it
leader if you're like,
off.
wow, this is like a super scary moment for us as a company, and so we're dealing with it right now, but also like we're gonna let it pass. And you know what? We're choosing joy, and but you have to be honest with where you are at the moment in order to show the pathway out.
Definitely. I mean, I had I cried a few times this week on my team Zoom calls,
Yeah,
and it was cleansing, and it was real, and it felt like we were all being seen, and we weren't dwelling, we were acknowledging and navigating this new normal that we're trying to understand post COVID-19.
exactly.
So thank you for that. I know we're winding down our time here, and I have just a couple more questions, or really one more before we do rapid fire. But, I mentioned earlier in our chat that you love meditation, and so I'm curious, like, how does meditation or mindful living help you in your creative endeavors, both personally and professionally?
In creative endeavors, I think in my last, Vipassana meditation is the one that has really stuck for me. And the last time I was away, there is, if it came up in my own mind in terms of, well, what does it look like to, like, am I just vision casting for the future of what I want? Does it create like the discontent for what I have now? And where does that live? And how do you be happy with what you have now? And what I just found, it also helped with that idea of strategy, that to be very clear through a process of meditation and see things as they are helps me be right here where I am.
Mm,
And it lets me see clearly for what's possible. Doesn't mean I'm not happy with what's happening right now, or can't be here solidly in the moment. And it lets me look to what's possible from here, what might be beautiful to grow, where can I step next. And so in terms of a creative process, I'm have been one that's very easily wrapped up in sort of the daydream of something, what it could turn into and how beautiful. But then those dreams easily die, I think, because they're not rooted. They're just kind of drifting in the wind somewhere. So it's a very important piece of my own creative process to go through the meditation and make sure I'm here, my feet are on the ground, I'm feeling very much in this moment, I'm content in this moment. And how beautiful would it be to create something like this vision, and
mm,
then plan the steps to get there. It doesn't mean that right now is not okay, that I need to be over there or somewhere else. No, what is the next step from here? And then what's the next step from here? And so it's really been very grounding for me to not get swept up in these sort of um, tumbleweed dreams that pass through.
right.
It allows me to ground more, and also deal with the saboteur as it comes up a little
Oh,
more,
yeah.
that helps the dreams seed and grow in a way that I myself won't cut it down.
I love it. And it really sounds like, too, what you're saying. It just gives you this ability to laser focus. And I love that. Like anybody trying to build anything, and whether that be just, hey, going back to a value you're really trying to activate in your life, that takes focus and it takes discipline. And it sounds like that really helps you get clear on perhaps what your value is and how to activate that, practically in your life. So, Brad, we're going to do rapid fire, and then I'm going to give you a moment to let my audience know where to connect with you online and social. So, rapid fire, just grab your, favorite cup of cafe mojo, and I'm going to ask you these big life questions, and you're just going to answer whatever word or phrase comes to your mind. No right or wrong, no judgment here. All right. So, we're going to dive in, and it's going to be fun.
Great.
All right, here we go. What do you believe?
Whew. I believe it is as it is.
What are you grateful for?
Grateful for sunshine.
What sustains you?
Love.
And you are on Mindful Living with Athea Davis. And I love to ask all my guests what mindful living means to you. So, Brad, what does mindful living mean to you?
Mindful living to me means taking the time for me, especially in mornings. I'm a firm believer that you wake up, you go to bed a little bit early, but you wake up a little bit earlier to have some time that you can sit alone, whether it's coffee in bed, whether it's on a couch, but you have some moments. So that might be through journaling, it might be through meditation, it might be through listening to music that doesn't have any words, something that you can be alone so that you can get grounded in yourself before you start giving to the rest of the world. Because if you can't plant your own feet first thing in the morning, then I think it's very hard to sort of get back on track later.
So beautiful. I agree so much. That morning time is so sacred and so precious. Last question, Brad, is where can people find you online and social media so they can follow all the sparkly sunshine that you're spreading out there?
Fun. Mostly on Instagram, probably, which is the Brad Chandler. I'm also starting a new morning project, actually. It's called Slow to Rise, so slowtorise.com. All about mornings, about waking up a little bit earlier, and we'll just share some stories and bits of things to really take advantage of that time for ourselves.
Beautiful. How exciting. I can't wait to see your new morning project develop. Thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been such a pleasure, and you definitely spread some sunshine my way in our chat today. And I really appreciate your authenticity and your presence, all the work that you're doing out in the world. And I want to acknowledge you for that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Athea.
Hey there, and welcome to the other side of my chat with Brad Chandler. Such a good conversation, right? I mean, what better timing? When I originally reached out to Brad, we were not in the midst of a pandemic, but it turns out the timing really worked out because a lot of what he was saying and what he was offering, I think, is really important for all of us. I mean, we're having to rethink how we entertain, how we just live life as parents with our kids at home, working from home remotely, how we're teaching and learning remotely. We're having to rethink a lot. And so I think his insights and wisdom, particularly from his perspective, from having an extensive background in business strategy and development, is super important right now because we are all in the midst of re-strategizing how we just do life in general, and how we do life at school, how we do life at business, how we do life as a parent. And so I do hope that you found my chat with Brad Chandler enjoyable, valuable, love his spirit, love his insights. So thank you, Brad, definitely for being on Mindful Living with Athea Davis. You have been listening to episode 60, How to Drive Joy in Uncertainty. And if you guys haven't been paying attention to all the joy they've been making over there at the Hollis Co, even during quarantine. Go follow them. Go follow Brad's new initiative, Slow to Rise. I'm excited to see what he does with that. I am certainly an advocate already, as I am slow to rise myself. I get up early, get my mind, heart, and brain, I said mind, but brain, heart, body ready for the day. All right, friends, thank you for tuning in. I would so appreciate you taking a moment to rate and review the podcast show on iTunes. Really makes a difference. And, screenshot this episode or screenshot any of the other episodes and tag me at Athea Davis. Share them out there on your social media platforms and tag me at Athea Davis, ATHEADAVIS. And I forgot to mention in the intro, I did have the opportunity to interview Dave Hollis about his new book. So you can go back into the archives, listen to my episode with Dave Hollis. How amazing. We get to have two peeps from the Hollis Co on the podcast here, sharing different perspectives. So again, thank you, Brad. Always a pleasure. Thank you all to tuning in. Stay safe. Stay healthy, wash your hands, social distance. Now, cover your face. I know, kind of weird, kind of awkward, y'all, but we got to do what we got to do so we can create and innovate something, more fabulous, more spectacular, more awesome sauce. We're going to flatten this curve together. And for those that are wondering how to do it in schools and businesses, I know this episode was really valuable. We need some joy so much during these times. All right. You know what I like to say. Make sure you're tuning into and spreading the awesome sauce here, there, and everywhere. And if y'all are like, what are you talking about, that awesome sauce? Y'all, I have a book. Today's Gonna Be Awesome Sauce, Daily Meditations for Youth, Parents, and Families. You can get it on my website, atheadavis.com. You can get it on Amazon. And I also have an affirmation and art card deck for youth, parents, and educators, also called Today's Gonna Be Awesome Sauce. Did I say that already? I don't know, y'all. I lose track. But I talk about it, share lots of those cards on my IG channel at Athea Davis. And you can find me on any of those platforms, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So I think that's it. I could probably talk more, but I know y'all are like, I got to get ready and on with my day. But again, thank you for tuning in. I love you, voting your victory, and I will see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Living Podcast with me, your host, Athea Davis. Think of me as your extra sparkly, good vibes, and no-nonsense guide, reminding you to take intentional action and choose to be the person today you want to become tomorrow. The world needs your sparkle, your joy, your gifts in action. Speaking of, I have a free gift for all my podcast listeners. Go now and subscribe to my email list and get your free health and wellness guide, Awesome Sauce Insights, at soulsenseyoga.com. And take a moment to rate and review my podcast on iTunes or wherever you may find yourself listening to Mindful Living with Athea Davis. I truly appreciate your time and feedback so I can continue to deliver valuable content to each of you. Until next time, have an awesome sauce day, friends.